Back in 1492, an Italian by the name of Christopher Columbus wanted to sail across the ocean to get to this place called India. In India, there were a lot of spices and other luxury goods that the wealthy people of Europe really wanted. And the trade routes had been cut off. The Turks had stopped the trade routes, so Columbus had this brilliant idea that he would sail across the Atlantic to get to India because it was just a short distance around to get there. He figured he could get there in about 60 days. And he shopped around with a few different monarchs until finally King Ferdinand of Aragon and Queen Isabella of Castile decided that they would fund him. Often we hear it as the King and Queen of Spain, but this actually is not true because Spain did not exist for a few more years after this. At this point, it was a marriage between the two largest groups of Spain who got together and formed this country that they called Castile and Leon. And it would eventually, within the next couple of decades, expand into all of what we now know of as Spain. Well, Christopher Columbus was correct about one thing. His voyage would take about 60 days. It took him 61 days to get to the Bahamas. He called it the Indies because he was sure he had found a series of islands off the coast of India. He explored them quite a bit over the next couple of months and gathered a lot of goods to take back with him to Europe, including local birds like the parrot, local animals, local plants like corn and tomatoes. And of course, he brought back some slaves. And this exchange began what we now refer to as the Columbian Exchange. Now, what exactly was the Columbian Exchange? Well, before this, we had the Silk Highway, which exchanged a lot of goods that were native to Asia with goods that were native to Europe. So there was a lot of exchange there, but we had never had an exchange like that between the Americas and the Old World. So there are several plants that are native to the Americas that the Old World had never seen. Things like tomatoes, potatoes, corn, and peppers. Many of the foods that we now associate with a particular region or particular place weren't even in those places prior to the Columbian Exchange. Things like the Italian spaghetti or marinara or anything that has tomato in it. There was no tomato in Italy prior to the Columbian Exchange. There were no peppers either. The bell peppers that are common in many Italian dishes were not there. The Irish potato famine could not have happened had the Columbian Exchange not brought potatoes to Ireland. The spicy foods that are so much associated with many Asian cultures, the Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, those spicy foods, the peppers that are so important in Chinese cuisines, those chili peppers, were an American crop. Now the Swiss are famous for their chocolate. Chocolate is another American crop. Rubber. We now see rubber used all over the place. Rubber balls, we've got tires that are vulcanized rubber. Rubber is used all over the world in all sorts of different things. Rubber is another American crop. However, there were some crops from the Old World that were brought to the New World that we had never seen here. Things like wheat. The corn tortilla that is famous throughout Latin America, that would happen. But the flour tortilla that sits beside it, that could not have happened before the Columbian Exchange. The coffee that most Americans drink with their morning meal, that is an old world drink, not native to the Americas. The bacon that many of us have with breakfast, the chicken we have with dinner, those things were old world foods. So this exchange, was it a good thing or was it a bad thing? My answer to that is yes. It was. It was a good thing and it was a bad thing. There are a lot of great things that came out of this Columbian Exchange. We have much better communication all around the world and trade routes and all of that that were made possible partly because of this Columbian Exchange. We have a much more rich cuisine. We have spaghetti, one of my favorite foods. We have Kung Pao chicken, another one of my favorites. Neither one of those dishes would be able to be made without the Columbian Exchange. And what about enchiladas? Usually wrapped in a flour tortilla and stuffed with pork or chicken or beef. All of that is old world food. So these foods got mixed from all of these different places in order to make more robust and full cuisines. But not everything from the Columbian Exchange is a good thing. There were several things that happened that were not so good. When Columbus came, one of the things that he brought with him was disease. The most famous of these was smallpox. But smallpox was not the only disease that he brought to the Americas. He also brought measles and mumps and several other diseases that the New World inhabitants had never seen. There are some estimates that it could have been as much as 50 to 90% of the population was decimated from these diseases. That is part of what made it so easy for the Spanish to just roll over all of the native populations and take over so much of Latin America. Yes, the lower quality of their weaponry also had some to do with it. The Old World having iron and the New World inhabitants still being basically Stone Age, they had some minimal metalworking, but no iron. No ability to smelt iron down to make a sword. While the smallpox decimation of the native population in the Americas is what we hear the most about when we hear about the transfer of diseases, it was not the only disease. The natives to the Americas did get in a few kicks. For instance, they gave syphilis to the Old World. Syphilis is a venereal disease. However, syphilis did not kill nearly as many people as smallpox. Smallpox is now the first disease to be completely eliminated as far as we know on the face of the earth. Syphilis is still around, but it's really easy to treat with just some antibiotics. But there is one thing that the Americas gave in this Columbian Exchange that is still kicking butt today, and that is tobacco. Tobacco is a plant that, when rolled and smoked, produces a stimulating effect in the user. This is also highly addictive. So addictive that some say that it is more addicted than heroin. And tobacco use is one of the leading causes of cancer, and some say that it has killed more people than have been killed in wars. So whether you feel that the Columbian Exchange was worth it or not, I'll leave that up to you. But I ask you, what's your favorite meal? Would that meal even be possible if it was not for the Columbian Exchange? What is your favorite cuisine? How much from that cuisine is only there because of the Columbian Exchange?